Hey fish tank fans, this is Prickly Hedgehog, just with hopefully a maybe 10-15 minute video here on some basics to do with the planted aquarium. And I know for many people setting up in the aquarium business, the ability to get a nice clear crystal tank and having live plants and the right fish and all that kind of thing can actually be a bit of a nightmare, and often leads to frustration and generally failure. A lot of people will buy a tank, maybe for example for a younger member of the family, in a bedroom, maybe 20 to 40 gallons, something like that, and then it turns into a big green fat mess, and suddenly you're cleaning that thing out and chucking it down in the basement or trying to sell the tank just to get rid of it because it turned into a disaster. Unfortunately, the reality of fish tank ownership is a fair amount of hard work. You won't have a successful tank unless you're prepared to put in a fair amount of work. So just be aware of that. If this is a hobby you think, oh well, it won't be all that difficult and it'll be easy, then it's probably in some ways the wrong hobby for you, because it does require a pretty persistent attitude and a great deal of patience to get things set up. And once it is set up, then it becomes a little easier. But initially, your setup can be kind of challenging. So one of the first mistakes that a lot of people make is that they buy the wrong size tank. And believe it or not, those smaller tanks that look so appealing on a desk or in a conspicuous room in the house, those can actually be a lot of work, because the smaller system is more susceptible to fluctuations in temperature and chemistry levels within the tank. And when we talk about chemistry, we're talking about pH levels, we're talking about ammonia buildup, which is caused by fish waste and food and things like that, nitrates and nitrites, anything that basically affects the water chemistry, either positively or negatively. And these kinds of issues create headaches for people first getting into the fish tank hobby. So be aware that, okay, you may not necessarily have to buy a larger tank like this one, which was 55 gallons and a fairly typical kind of large size or larger size that you'll find in a lot of pet stores. But too small of a tank can also be a problem as well. It sounds kind of counterintuitive that you would be buying a smaller tank that would actually be more work, but you have to factor into the process that the smaller the tank, the more I need to maintain a watch on my chemistry levels, because the smaller body of water doesn't sustain fluctuations quite so well. A larger tank will also show the same issues over a period of time, but not as rapidly as a smaller volume of water. And this is because basically at the end of the day, this whole system is closed, and you have to be aware that because it's not out in a river system or in a lake system, minerals and fresh water is not being applied or being recycled through on a regular basis. You have a closed system, so even if you have good filtration, if you're not doing regular water changes, which you'll hear a lot about from most enthusiasts, if you're not doing regular water changes in the tank, then you will find rapidly the water quality deteriorates. And water changes basically mean that you're sucking up some of the crud at the bottom of the tank using a siphon system, and changing, I would think, probably between 5 and 10% as a minimum of your water per week. And some people will recommend more than that, especially if there's a health problem. So just be aware that that's going to be something you're going to have to do on a weekly basis. Don't expect the tank to do well if you're doing water changes once a month or once every couple of weeks. Very rapidly, you will find that that water chemistry, the algae, and all that kind of stuff will build up pretty quickly. So what you put into the tank too, in terms of water, is another thing that can influence the quality of tank life. So I use RO water, which I buy. I eventually want to get a home RO system. And I buy it because I know that I'm putting in a neutral solution. I'm not convinced that the water that I have here is ideal, and I don't want to take the gamble on throwing in my tap water, and I've had problems with tap water here in the particular area that I'm living in. Water's very hard, has a lot of minerals in it, which is not necessarily a bad thing on its own, but it affects the kind of setup that I want to have, and can create some issues for me. And obviously water from the tap contains chemicals that need to be extracted out of the water, such as chlorine and stuff like that. Chlorine itself is not necessarily a problem. It will dissipate naturally on its own, but if you're throwing that in on a regular basis with the high mineral level that I have, which basically means it's also going to have a fair amount of alkalinity, those things can affect the pH level, and again the water chemistry of the tank ultimately. And in my experience, it's been a negative for me. In other parts of the country, it may not be a problem for you at all. You may have soft water. I have very hard water. So depending on what's coming out of your tap, which you probably should be tested, or should get tested before you start throwing it in your tank when you have any animals in there, to make sure that that it's generally safe to use, and is not going to cause wild fluctuations of pH level, which is generally bad. So or flood the tank with too many nutrients, which some algae will really like, and you get that bacteria bloom, and which makes the water cloudy, which is usually normally associated with initial tank setup and cycling. So this is an established tank, 3 to 4 years it's been around, and the first couple of years really I had a lot of those kinds of problems because I didn't know what I was doing, and I feel bad for people that have gone through some of the experiences that I've had, just not knowing fully what was going on in my tank. And many months of research and learning and just engaging with the hobby has taught me to fix things. And even now I'm still learning. I'm always learning. There's so much information online, so if you have an opportunity to sit down and do some research, thoroughly recommend you do that before you buy fish, before you buy plants, before you buy anything really. Do some homework on everything that you're buying, so you know that it's compatible and what kind of expectations you're going to have for each of those purchases. So we've talked about water chemistry, and like I said, I use RO water, which basically means most of the stuff that's in the water is taken out of it. So I have a fairly neutral solution that I'm putting in there. I know I'm not going to get any surprises, and that's just me, but other aquarists have different thoughts on this, and excuse me, and use tap water with great success, no drama at all. So just be aware, RO water doesn't have all of the nutrients that you may be looking for from the water. So if you use that, you're going to have to put in other supplements as well, and we'll get to that a little bit later. The other thing is, in terms of a planted aquarium, you're going to need two things. One, aside from the water chemistry, we're also talking about light, which you can see here. I have a waypoint light. It's a 4-foot, 48-inch lamp system with 4 bulbs in there, and it produces about 214 watts. Now, with new LED lighting, which generally uses low wattage and still produces the same amount of light, some of the formulas are a little different now, but generally speaking, from research that I've done, most people seem to agree about 2 to 4 watts per gallon. So I have covers on top here as well, which actually just diffusing a little bit of the light, believe it or not, and there's still plenty of light getting in there. I have a lot of plant growth persistently, so at least once a week, and usually every 2 to 3 weeks I have to do a fairly heavy purge of plants just to keep it from growing out of control, which it does rather rapidly. So lighting is obviously very important. Some plants actually grow in low light, so it's not a rule of thumb. Some plants will do quite well with lower lighting, but generally speaking, if you buy a setup and you get the store-bought light and there's just a single tube or a double tube in there, it's probably not going to be adequate lighting. They may tell you that there's a grow light in there, which will encourage growth, but the reality is what you need for tropical plants is high wattage, because those plants are generally used to long hours of sun exposure with the sun high over them to encourage that kind of growth. So if you're having plants that are struggling growing, primarily it's usually because there's a lack of light. They're just not, the light's just not penetrating deep enough into the tank to allow them to grow. And you'll find that as the plants get higher and higher up in the tank, they start looking a little better. And yet down below at the stone level, if you like, the base of the tank, then they tend to look weedy and stringy and stuff like that. So, and they may be a lot of leaf die-off, so on and so forth, and that's often associated with a lack of light. The other thing is in the gravel here, my gravel is probably 4 or 5 inches deep almost, and I have a mixture of stones and some sand and also a layer of substrate. Now the substrate is like a clay type material which is full of nutrients. It's a soil substitute, if you like, that allows the plants not only to anchor into the ground, but it also allows them to absorb nutrients, which at the end of the day most plants absorb their nutrients through the root system. People that struggle with plant growth often get told, "Oh, you're not dosing enough of this, that, and the other." Well, that may be true, but it also may be more important that you don't have enough of the nutrients being absorbed through the root system itself. And the muck that gets in there from fish waste and stuff like that, that alone is not going to be ideal for the plants and can actually cause the roots to rot and stuff like that as well because of the toxicity levels down there. There's a lack of oxygen lower down in the tank, and that doesn't always do the plant's roots a lot of good. So you need a good substrate, and that's pretty much it. The other thing, obviously we have the right heaters. I have a couple of heaters in here, about 200 watts is each one, so there's plenty of heating, and I have two just because if one breaks down then I have another one. In the summer months it's not such a big deal, but obviously in the winter where I am it gets pretty chilly, so the temperature in the house is usually not enough to keep the body of water warm enough for the fish to be healthy. A slight drop in the winter months is not a big deal, but if you have too much of a swing, then again you're going to end up with dead fish and dead animals. So it's not something that you want, especially with fish like I have, these discus fish, which are pretty expensive and are now fairly valuable once they have gotten to a larger size here. So the blue one in the background is probably 5-6 inches now, so he's getting a good healthy size, and that's a scorpion discus for those that are interested. So now I've lost my train of thought. So yeah, so we had the heater there. Filtration is another one, and I mentioned before that filtration alone is not the be-all and end-all. There's a whole lot of different thoughts and a whole lot of different products that you can buy. You don't have to go with the fancy canister filters. Those are pretty good and probably ideal especially for a tank of this size where you want to cycle a lot of water fairly quickly. But a hang-on-the-back filter, which has a good flow rate, is also perfectly good, and that will allow a certain amount of oxygen diffusion while also extracting the solid waste and also the chemical waste from the tank. In this case, primarily ammonia. And it does that with the bio-oil filters have bacteria that grow on those surfaces, which allows the bacteria to basically gobble up all that ammonia. It happens, like, you won't be able to see it because it's too dark, but I have a canister filter here. It's the Magnum 350 filter. Works perfectly adequate, except right now where I've got too much tubing going on and it's slowed my flow rate down considerably, which has presented me with a few problems that I'm now in the process of rectifying. So it's going to be my next task this morning. So so there you go. Filtration, really important. If you need to clean that out fairly regularly. If you're not having good filtration, then your water quality is also going to suffer, and you need to be able to keep those water changes going too to help contribute to the health of the water. In the middle there, I also have the UV sterilizer, which is another way to basically zap bugs in the tank before it goes back into the system. Basically, the canister filter takes all the solid, starts breaking down ammonia with the bacteria. So I have bioballs and ceramic discs in there, which allow for that bacteria to grow on it. And then after that's gone through the system, it then enters the UV sterilizer, which, like I said, zaps basically whatever's left over that doesn't want to go. You don't really want going back into the tank. Again, you don't have to start off with these systems. You don't have to buy all of these things at once. You can slowly build up as your budget allows. Because at the end of the day, maintaining a tank can actually be pretty expensive. At least the initial setup is pretty expensive. And on the right there, the thing with the little orange light on it, basically that's a CO2 injection system. And that's primarily for the plants. Again, carbon is one of the primary elements that the plants need for growth, and a certain amount of CO2 actually assists that and allows the plants to absorb a good amount of carbon, which will encourage growth. In addition, you can also be supplementing with organic carbon, which comes in a liquid form. Things like iron, which is very, very important for a lot of plants. That also encourages basically growth, but also the health of the plants, how green they are, and what their colors are like. If they're not getting enough of those micronutrients, they generally won't grow as well. Potassium is another one that can be put in there. Phosphorus is another, but again, you have to be careful about what you're dosing. Too many of those kinds of chemicals will again influence the water quality. So pretty much that's it. So if I was to recap real quick here, and so much for a brief explanation, but water quality is contingent on frequent water changes because the system is closed. So you need to make sure that water is being cycled in the tank. Obviously you need light, because inadequate light is not going to allow most plants to grow sufficiently. There isn't enough in some lighting systems to actually help the plants to grow. Filtration is really important. If you don't have good filtration, then the toxic buildup of certain chemicals will be bad for the tank. And the other thing is, of course, the substrate. If you don't have good substrate in there, then your plants aren't going to anchor, and they're not going to be able to absorb nutrients through the root system, which most plants do. So that's some basics, and I hope that helps a little bit. I wished I'd learned this early on. I didn't know a lot of these things. It's kind of something that I picked up, a lot of it just by reading online. So there are any number of enthusiasts out there that will help you with information like this. There's tons of online forums, and you'll always find an answer to weird questions that you have. The reality is, just to finish up here, like I said before, I'm always learning. I'm still learning about this hobby, and you won't pick it all up in one go. You will have some accidents. You will have the odd fish die. You will have the odd plant die, which I had recently, which was disappointing. And all I've got is a little scrap of it left, and I'm hoping I can nurse it back to full size again. So mistakes get made, and it's the nature of the business, unfortunately. But for the most part, if you follow the basic principles that I kind of outlined, I hope that brings you a great deal of joy. And I love my tank. It's one of the most fun hobbies I've ever had, and there's a lot of different ways to spend money. This is one of them, and it's kind of satisfying, especially in the winter when it's all brown and gray and boring outside, but you can come home after a long day and sit in front of the fish tank, look at what you've created, and feel satisfied and feel very pleased with something. And it's always fun to get nice comments, and people are always amazed when they see the kind of setup that you have. That's really satisfying. So, well, enough babble as usual. I hope this was somewhat informative, and there you have it.